You have probably already met this person. Maybe you are in a relationship with them right now. They are charming, warm, even. They remember your coffee order and they laugh at exactly the right moments. But something underneath the surface makes your nervous system feel like it is permanently braced for impact. You can't explain it. You have no evidence. And that confusion, that gap between what your gut is screaming and what your eyes are seeing, is not a coincidence. It is the design. The most dangerous manipulators in your life are not the ones who are obviously cruel. They are the ones who have learned to hide their toxicity behind the exact behaviors you are trained to trust. And the research shows there are 4 specific, measurable signals they cannot fully suppress no matter how good their mask is. Most people will never learn to read them. This video is going to change that. Before we get into the signals, we need to establish something that most people get completely wrong about toxic personalities. We tend to think of manipulation as a strategy, a choice, something a person decides to do when they are cornered or desperate. But behavioral genetics tells a different story. The cluster of traits that researchers call the Dark Triad, narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and everyday sadism, these are not just bad habits. They are stable personality structures. Some of them are significantly heritable. What this means for you, practically, is that you are not dealing with someone who will improve once they feel more secure. You are dealing with a system, and like any system, it produces consistent, predictable outputs. Once you know what outputs to look for, you stop being surprised. You start being prepared. The first signal is what researchers call instrumental warmth. Here is how it works. Most people are warm because warmth is their natural state. They are interested in you, but a person with high Dark Triad traits has a specific observable pattern. Their warmth spikes precisely when they need something and drops to a baseline the moment the need is met. Pay attention to the timing, not the temperature. Does their attentiveness intensify right before they ask for a favor, right after a conflict when they need to reset the relationship, or when there is an audience watching? And does it quietly disappear on an ordinary Tuesday with nothing at stake? The warmth itself is not the signal. The rhythm of the warmth is the signal. This is not the same as someone having a bad day or being distracted. This is a consistent pattern over time. Keep a mental log, not because you are building a case, but because your pattern recognition system needs data, and data requires memory. The second signal is what psychologists describe as boundary testing sequencing. They do this early, almost always within the first few weeks of any significant relationship. It is subtle enough that most empathetic people rationalize it away, and that rationalization is exactly what they are looking for. The test is small. They borrow something without asking. They make a slightly cutting joke and watch your face. They cancel last minute with a weak excuse and see if you push back or accommodate. They are not doing this randomly. They are running a diagnostic. They want to know, does this person hold their ground or do they apologize when I push? Your response to the first small violation tells them everything they need to know about how much latitude they have. The people who pass the selection process are not the weak ones. They are the kind ones, the ones who give the benefit of the doubt, the ones whose natural instinct is to extend grace. If you are watching this video, there is a very high probability you are one of those people, and that is not a flaw. It is a feature that a certain type of person has learned to exploit. The third signal is empathy dissociation, and this one is the most disorienting to live with. We discussed in a previous video how manipulative people split empathy into 2 separate functions. Cognitive empathy, which is the intellectual ability to read what you are feeling, and affective empathy, which is the biological ability to actually feel it with you. They have the first one in abundance. The second one is largely absent. What this creates in real life is a person who seems to understand you perfectly in conversation, but then acts with complete indifference to your pain the moment the conversation ends. They described your situation back to you with stunning accuracy. They said all the right things, but then nothing changed. Their behavior did not shift even slightly. That gap, that mismatch between their verbal understanding and their behavioral follow-through, is the fingerprint. A person with genuine affective empathy cannot consistently maintain that gap. The discomfort of knowing they hurt someone eventually bleeds into behavior. For someone with high Dark Triad traits, it does not. Watch the behavior, not the words. Over a meaningful stretch of time, those 2 things will either converge or they will not. The fourth signal is the one that most people miss entirely because it is the most counterintuitive. Researchers call it grandiosity under threat. Narcissistic structure is not actually about high self-esteem. It is about fragile self-esteem that requires constant external maintenance, which means there is a specific trigger that cracks the mask open in a way that nothing else can. Criticism, not cruelty, not rejection, just ordinary, reasonable, accurate criticism. The kind that a secure person would hear, sit with, maybe feel a little stung by, and then process. For someone with narcissistic traits, even mild, well-intentioned feedback lands as a full-scale attack on their identity. What follows is disproportionate. The intensity of the reaction does not match the scale of the input. They may rage. They may disappear for days. They may launch a counterattack designed to dismantle your credibility. The size of the reaction is the data point, not the behavior itself, but the size of it relative to what prompted it. Keep that ratio in mind. It is one of the most reliable early detection systems you have access to. Now, here is the part that I need to say carefully. Reading these signals is not about becoming paranoid. It is not about looking for monsters in every room. The vast majority of difficult people in your life are just people. Stressed, wounded, struggling, not malicious. The distinction matters because the response is completely different. A wounded person can meet you in conversation. A dark tetrad personality structure cannot. And the tragedy for most empathetic people is that they spend years trying to have a conversation that was never possible. They brought more warmth, more patience, more careful explanation, and the situation did not improve because they were using a software solution on a hardware problem. The first step to protecting yourself is not technique, it is accurate diagnosis. Because once you see the structure clearly, once you understand that you are not dealing with someone who is confused about your feelings, but with someone who has processed your feelings and simply factored them out, the compulsion to explain yourself begins to dissolve. You stop trying to make them understand. You start making decisions based on what you actually observe. If you have been watching this channel for a while, you already know the framework for what comes next. We have talked about the Gray Rock method, the BIFF protocol, compassionate detachment. Those are the tools for after diagnosis. This was the diagnosis. And if you want to go deeper on this, I have put together a free checklist based on the clinical measurement scales researchers actually use to identify these patterns. It is not a quiz. It is an observation framework, something you can use quietly over time to bring clarity to a situation that has been keeping you confused for far too long. Link is in the description. The signals are there. They always have been. You just needed to know what you were looking at.